Hello, folks. Red Labor here today. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful summer. I want to talk about the inconsistency by the modern right when it comes to big government. They're very selective about big government, and there are certain things that they don't really want to acknowledge when we had supposedly smaller government in the past. Now, for example, in the year 2012, racism, integration, racial equality. I mean, all across the board, you know, I want to take it at face value that most Americans are not racist and we're pretty tolerant as a society. And I mean that ranges everyone from the liberal left, from progressives to the center, to conservatives of all types of varieties, to even ultra conservatives. I do not believe that the bulk of America, that we're a racist society. We've gone a long way in the past generation or two, and this is good. This is good that we have. So I want to use reasoning, and I'll use the race question as reasoning that about big government versus small government. When we had small government in the beginning of the birth of our nation, and all the way up to the times of Jim Crow, are you going to tell me, all the small government types, are you going to tell me that African Americans had more freedom back then than they do today? Because that's silly. They didn't, and that's when we had supposedly smaller government. Slavery, all the way up to the Civil War. Are you going to tell me African Americans were really doing really well, and we were colorblind, and they had exactly the same opportunities as whites? Absolutely not. So if you're having an institution such as slavery, is that small government? And is that our government was supposedly small, but we sat there in our society and we thought that was fine to have such an institution to allow white people to own another human being. So, that's one area right there. After the Civil War, all the way up to the modern civil rights movement, are you going to tell me that African Americans had all the opportunities and equality that whites had? And we supposedly have smaller government back then. And so there you have it right there. And I am glad that government got bigger, and we had the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Civil Rights Act of 1965 to have racial equality all across the board in all 50 states. It's a good thing. So I make no apologies for that. And I mean, as I said, I think that we've gone a long way, and America has grown. They grew up. They grew up to the point where, they grew up to a point where, race is not a big deal anymore. Yeah, there are pockets of racism in various places, but you're gonna have idiots across the board. Whites who hate blacks and blacks who hate whites and what have you. I mean, people got a right to hate as long as they're not harming anybody else. So, okay, enough of that. Let's talk about religion for a second. I hear some on the Christian right today talk about how, well, we Christians are persecuted in America. These liberals and these progressives and ACLU types are just treating us, they just want to strip us of our religious liberty. Well, you know what? That's not true. Actually, it's quite the opposite. When they eliminated prayer from public school and then started enacting things that were like separation of church and state issue oriented, this was not to strip Christians of their right to believe. It's just to make sure that the First Amendment, where we don't have a national church the U.S. Constitution is being adhered to. So I mean, and even those on the conservative side of the spectrum. Now, when Herman Cain's talking about advocating the rights of local communities to deny the rights of Muslims to build mosques, is that religious liberty? What about the state of South Carolina, where if you're an atheist, you're forbidden to run for a political office? And let's go back to the birth of our nation, when every state in the U.S., with the exception of the state of Rhode Island, Roman Catholics and Jews were not allowed to run for office. Was that? And we supposedly had smaller government back in those days. Were we more free then than we are today? Hardly. So let's just get rid of this myth that if you're a Christian, you're being persecuted. And no, I'm not Christian bashing. I'm a Christian myself. I go to Mass every Sunday. So, let's just, make that clear. Christians have their rights. Jews have their rights. Muslims have their rights. And I know this is going to sound crazy to many of y'all, but, atheists also have their rights. Everybody's got the right to believe or not believe. Okay, so that's an example right there. Let's talk about American politics today. I would venture to say that with supposedly larger government, we have more freedom in America today than we did in 1912. But I will also venture to say that America was more free in the year 1972 than we are today. Let me explain that for a moment. Yeah, as I said, in 2012, we have pretty much achieved racial equality in America. I mean, and that's a good thing. And it was all the immorality of Jim Crowism, segregation, and lynchings, and just treating people who were not white as subhuman. I mean, back a century ago and further. I'm glad those days are gone. And it took the modern civil rights movement to make this happen. To make this happen. And by 1972, we moved a great deal toward equality. So let's talk about another issue. Let's talk about the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's talk about the Supreme Court for a moment. And the courts have shifted to the right since the Nixon, Ford, Reagan years. With the Supreme Court shifting further and further to the right, are you going to tell me that we have more freedom now today through the courts than we did during the years of Earl Warren, when civil liberties were actually expanded? Because during the time of Earl Warren, from the mid-1950s to the time he stepped down in 1969 as the Chief Justice, we had the biggest expansion of civil liberties and individual rights than any other time period. And to the point in 1972, I would venture to say that we had more freedom in 1972 than we do today. Why would I say that? Well, for starters, let's go to the issue about the USA Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act. Both parties in 2001 went and voted in the Patriot Act. And sadly, President Obama signed to make the Patriot Act permanent. John McCain sure as hell would have done it the same thing, and probably quicker. Mitt Romney, several months ago in the Republican primaries, was defending the National Defense Authorization Act, and President Obama signed it. And the thing about it is, the National Defense Authorization Act is a really big assault on civil liberties. And because we got to fight this war on terrorism, that kind of mentality. Are you going to tell me that we have more freedom in 2012 than we did in 1972 when civil liberties were actually being expanded? Let me talk about another issue. gay rights, gay and lesbian rights. A generation ago, it was, the right wing, and even some liberals were opposed to gay rights all across the board, and everybody had their prejudices. So and back then, if you believe in minding your own business, and you saw somebody, you knew somebody was a homosexual, and you didn't give a damn, and you just went on with your day-to-day life, that made you tolerant. And eventually, when people realize how silly and how wrong it is to sit there and be busybodies with people's lives, and to discriminate against somebody because they were gay, when the right wing decided to change the language of it, and then all of a sudden they were no longer opposed to gay rights. They were now opposed to special rights, and I really believe many of them believe special rights is somehow translated into really equal rights. Special equality is not a special right. Let's talk about the gay marriage issue. Now, my position on this issue would be a little different from the many progressives. I support gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender equality all across the board for the right reasons. Human beings are human beings, and human beings are entitled to all equal rights all across the board, and that includes the right to marry. Now, does that mean that if we have gay rights recognized in all 50 states, that a church, a synagogue, or an Islamic temple should be forced to marry a couple that the same-sex couple, and even if it's against their religious beliefs? Of course not. I would not ever support forcing a religious institution to recognize something they oppose. But at the same time, in secular society, if same-sex couples want to get married, they should have that right to get married. And if you're opposed to homosexuality, you also have a right to be vocal against homosexuality and not be punished for it. Gays have a right to be gays without being punished, and critics of homosexuality have a right to be critical without punishment. So in a way, I take kind of a libertarian view on such matters. But I just wanted to correct this myth about larger governments equaling tyranny. In a lot of ways, as our government got larger through FDR's New Deal, LBJ's Great Society, the Earl Warren era of the U.S. Supreme Court, and just people becoming more laid back and liberal, or about things. Well, guess what? That's actually a good thing. I hope that this settled that argument. Take care. Bye-bye.